Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Vanas, and this is Real Estate Pro Talk. Real Estate Pro Talk is a real estate-oriented program which will cover a variety of topics every Friday afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. on WOON Radio. Some of the topics we'll be talking about during our time together will be how to buy and sell a home, how to choose a real estate agent, home inspections, creative financing, flipping real estate, how to develop a piece of land, and private mortgage financing. I've been in the real estate business coming up on 40 years now, of which I own a real estate brokerage company, a real estate school, and a land development company. All of the knowledge that we are going to try to impart on you today is based on the continuing education classes that I teach licensed real estate brokers and agents, along with my personal experiences and those of our expert guests. The goal in doing this is so you'll have the information in hand when you meet a seasoned real estate professional. You're welcome to call us today at 401-766-1240 and ask any questions on the subjects we'll be discussing. And, of course, after the show, you're welcome to call 401-265-6144, which is my personal cell phone, and I'll be more than happy to address any concerns you have. Today, I'm really happy to have Paul Brunetti from Paul Brunetti Home Inspections. Paul's been in the inspection business for as long as I can remember. I think he's been in the business as long as I've been a real estate agent, and that's a long time ago. Say hello, Paul.
Well, hello there. Thank you for having me.
Great. Paul, thanks for coming up today, because I really wanted to have you on for a while because of the people really don't understand what's involved in a home inspection on a property. Plus, you have a lot of things going on right now with the state of Rhode Island regarding home inspector licensing. Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of things I'd like to talk about. But before I get into that, I'm always curious, Paul, about how did you get in the business? How did you get your start?
Well, I grew up in a heating supply house family, and so heating would be my strong point. And ultimately, I was a facilities engineer for a public housing authority, and I learned an awful lot about mechanical building and remodeling and all that kind of stuff. Then I was and I also did Section 8 building inspections, which I really found interesting, inspecting. So I think the bug kind of bit me there. And then I was a property inspector for a local risk pool insurance company. Then I heard about this outfit called ASHI. It's the acronym, or it's an abbreviation for the American Society of Home Inspectors. And it really piqued my interest. And I looked into it, and I said, geez, I think that's something I really want to look into. It was kind of new at the time. This is like 34 or 5 years ago. And home inspection wasn't really known that much back then.
I remember back then you had to, when I bought my house,
you might have a builder or something.
There was you had a termite inspection.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah. And so from there, I shortly after that, I saw Griggs & Brown Pest Control and Termite Control Company. They decided to get into the home inspection home inspection business, and I applied. And I got the job, and I worked there for about 32 or 33 years. After 2 years, I became manager of that division, and we had upwards of like 7 or 8 inspectors in 3 states, and we were kind of the only game in town. And then all of a sudden, competition came in, and we kind of slowed down a bit. But I still like it as much as I did back then. It's been my passion. I actually enjoy it.
Wow,
I really
that's
do.
great. That's great. So of course, there's always something interesting to find whenever.
Yeah, it's not a boring job. Not at all. Not boring at all. It's challenging, certainly, and hectic at times.
Yeah.
You don't always have what you have to say is not always popular, as you know.
Absolutely.
But it is what it is. I know it's an overused expression, but That's true.
Well, your job is to be to basically be an advocate for the truth. I mean, you can't.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
as long as everyone knows about the problem, and I've always said this through my real estate brokerage career, it's not only the inspection, but it's what the person is paying for the property. If they're getting a real good buy,
Sure.
you know, they may overlook some things if they're not getting a good buy, or if there's something major they didn't know about, then they deserve to know that too. At least that they can go into it informed, and it becomes a win-win situation.
Sure.
And I think ultimately the sellers now appreciate a good home inspector, because let's face it, the seller's disclosure form that most sellers have to sign, the buyer now can come back on them after the fact. We've had some circumstances. So really, from a good home inspector can alleviate any future liability they may have by not disclosing a certain issue. So
Sure.
I'm always, whenever I have a home inspection and I represent the seller,
Right.
I'm actually kind of thankful that the things were discovered that were discovered, because when everyone walks away from the closing table, the buyer know what they got, the seller knows what they've
Right.
gotten, and most of the liability and the angst has gone away, instead of finding out about the issue 6 months later
After you're closed.
after you close. Yeah.
And you'd be surprised and you probably wouldn't be surprised, but I think the average person might be surprised that a lot of homeowners don't know their house as much as they think they know their house.
Absolutely.
They're like, that's in my house. I have termites.
Right.
Oh my God, I didn't know I had that. That kind of thing. I can't tell you how many times I end up doing an inspection for the seller's new house that they're buying.
Wow.
So, that guy was really thorough. I want that guy.
Right.
That kind of thing. You get that a lot. You do. You get that. They don't get mad. They just because they know it's you see the picture of the broken whatever it is, and that guy was. How do you find that? Yeah, I want that guy.
Right.
You get that a lot. I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm sure a lot of home inspectors
Absolutely,
can
because
tell
you're
you the
doing
same
your
thing.
job, and if you do it well,
I
people
try to be fair. I
recognize
think
it.
most of us try to be fair.
Wow. So tell me about the certifications that you've obviously you have a long storied history of in mechanical and building trades, but what kind of certifications do home inspectors need now? Do they have to have any kind of classes under their belt? I know, like in Massachusetts, they have to take a class. And I don't particularly know how many hours the class is, but they have to take a class for so long, and then they go out and they have an exam, and then all of a sudden they pass and they're licensed home inspectors.
Pretty much.
Is that basically how Rhode Island
That's
works?
what's going to happen. Do you want to get into the licensing issue now? Okay. So basically, Rhode Island, Mass, and Connecticut, we all worked together. There was a group of us, and we met in Rhode Island at one point. This is 20 years ago, okay, well, 21 years ago, and we met in Massachusetts. All the Rhode Island people, the Mass people, the Connecticut people, in all three states. We had meetings of the minds. The plan was to unveil these inspection licenses all at the same time. They all passed at the same time. We all compared notes. We had very similar laws. Although Connecticut, surprisingly, Connecticut does not require home inspectors to have errors and omissions insurance.
Really?
Which really boggles my mind. Must have been a strong insurance lobbyist, I guess, who knows, or an anti-insurance. Massachusetts does require errors and omissions insurance. Rhode Island will require errors and omissions insurance. And like I said, it will. So what happened was all three states, we passed the law at the same time, and we're all going to roll them out. I think it was June or July of like '99 to be effective. A couple of months after, all of a sudden, Rhode Island says, "Wait a minute, we don't have any money to fund this program."
Wow.
Put the brakes on, and so it's been kind of languishing, for lack of a better word, for a good part of over 20 years.
Really?
So we have this very pro-consumer law on the books, continuing education, like you just mentioned, errors and omissions requirements, code of ethics, SOP, standards of practice. The inspector is required to do this, is required to do that, is not required to do this, is prohibited from, there's a lot.
So it's a standard.
It's very good.
Standard menu that everyone tries to follow.
You have to. Yeah,
Okay.
It's a true license. It's not a registration like the contractors in Rhode Island. They're not licensed. They're registered. So anyway, getting back to Massachusetts, they require a 75-hour class before you can even apply. Now, way back then, everybody that was doing it for a long time, including me. I carry a Mass license and a Connecticut license
I see.
for home inspectors. I was grandfathered in.
I see.
So now finally, they found money somehow. I honestly still to this day don't know what happened, but I'm just glad that we are finally going to have licensing, and it's going to happen. It's going to be effective this coming year, probably January or February.
Right.
We're actually in the public comment period now. So anybody that wants to put their 2 cents and critique or what have you about the proposed rules and regulations, myself and another gentleman that's on the board, his name is David Grzinski. He has an Advantage Home Inspection, and the two of us sit on the Rhode Island Contractor Registration Board.
I see.
And so our charge was to write the rules and regulations, and I don't mind saying it was painstaking. It was
I'm sure.
It was so detailed. We used Massachusetts as kind of a guide because why reinvent the wheel? But of course, we put Rhode Islandisms, if you will, into it, and of course we changed quite a few things. But most of the states are pretty similar. Connecticut is similar too. So we're just really excited. So if anybody's interested to put your 2 cents in, if you go on it's crb.ri.gov. That's the Rhode Island Contractor Registration website. On their homepage, you scroll down to the bottom, and you can click on the new rules and regulations and say, yeah, I think this is good, I think this is bad, what have you, and we will take that
So
into consideration.
the public can
Yes.
comment.
Absolutely.
How long is that window
through
open for?
the 31st of October, so it's about a week left.
Okay. Oh wow.
Yeah.
So now's the time.
They gave him a month. It was
You're fortunate coming on.
Yeah, that's
now
right. We
because,
talked about this.
We
Yeah,
got basically
perfect
a
timing.
week.
Perfect
week
timing.
left. Wow.
Yeah.
Is it the Contractors Registration Board that oversees? Will they end up ultimately be the police force?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And there'll be so if there's in fact part of this of the licensing program in your report, you have to put a blurb, if you will, stating that any complaints can be directed to Rhode Island Contractor Registration Board, the address, the number, the whole bit.
Right.
It's a true license, just like electrician or plumber or pipe fitter or what have you.
Right.
It's not a registration. It's the real deal. It's
Right.
I'm really proud of the fact that we got this thing going.
And that's certainly needed. Except like I go back to when I bought my first house. I brought Dad along, and my father. God bless him. He's no longer with us, but he was a very good plumber. But I don't know if his carpentry skills were. He became a plumber because he was good at being a plumber. We built a few tree forts in the yard, and some of them were kind of slanted. But other than that, like everyone else back then, I brought Dad along. And
That was
Dad,
the norm. Maybe a builder friend or
or your uncle who does roofing or whatever. Someone, excuse me, with some kind of inkling in the business, and you wouldn't get the full. The full banana split, I call it.
Oh no, and it probably was verbal too back then. Probably nothing in writing back then.
Right.
I'm guessing, right?
Oh yeah.
That won't fly anymore. It's got to be written report, contract. In fact, you can't put what they call exculpatory language in the contract limiting your liability. That's a no-no. You're
really?
not allowed to do that.
Okay.
In Massachusetts, they have that. I think Connecticut has that as well. In Rhode Island, we absolutely have that.
Really?
So you cannot say, if I miss something, I'll give you your money back and that's it. No,
Right.
that's not going to fly. You cannot limit your level of liability.
What I like about it standardizes it, just like the government does. I noticed, I teach a lead class, and part of the lead, the EPA's goal was to standardize lead tests, so everybody who does a lead test is using the same format, the same unified standard.
Right.
And it sounds like you're doing the same thing now within
Rhode
that
Island,
community.
Yes, that's correct. We're going to have a standards of practice, and this is all on that website. You can look at it. The inspector is required to, inspect the roof. The inspector is not required to necessarily walk on the roof.
Right.
Honestly, one of the worst things you can do to a roof is walk on it, especially if it's an older roof.
Exactly.
And some roofs you just can't physically walk. It depends on how steep of a pitch it is.
Right. And I know that for a fact because when I was living at home when I was a kid, my father would never let me. In the fall you had to clean the gutters.
Then you got to yeah.
And it was so much easier to walk up on the roof to clean the gutters than to take a ladder and move it every 3 feet all the way around the perimeter of an L-shaped branch.
Yes, it's
and,
forever.
I could never walk on the roof because he was so afraid the roof shingles were going to crack because he was trying to get.
Well, you're going to fall off.
He was trying to get 25 years out of a 20-year roof. So I understand.
Interesting.
But what our listeners may not realize is that most sales in Rhode Island, when someone agrees to buy a house, if they're using the Rhode Island Association of Realtors Purchase and Sales Agreement, a person has the right by virtue of the contract to have an inspection within 10 business days of the purchase, of the actual signing of the sales agreement. And within that 10-day period, they call a guy like you, and you'll go out and you'll inspect the property. And it allows the buyer to go back to the seller now to find anything that was not disclosed or they didn't know about, and it resolves the matter really up front instead of finding out about it later, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's important. Massachusetts is a little different, obviously.
Yeah,
they do the
they sign
inspection
off it
first,
right,
and they get that out of the way, and then price is negotiated after the fact. Which I guess each one has
a little bit different,
has their advantages.
Yes.
I kind of like the Rhode Island way better.
That's what I'm used to
from a brokerage perspective, because if I negotiate my best price with the seller, it's just subject to the inspection and subject to me, the buyer acquiring a mortgage, where the Massachusetts way, it's kind of open on the price. So someone else can come in and kind of, scoop the house price-wise if things don't go so well during the inspection. So I kind of like the Rhode Island way better.
Gotcha.
Tell me, so the types of inspections you do, basically single-family homes?
Yeah, single-family, multi-family. I do some light commercial. I know a lot of home inspectors don't like to do commercial. I enjoy it. Up to a certain, I would do maybe a 15, 20,000 square foot office building.
Really? Okay.
But I mean, as far as like a couple of 100,000 square foot building, like a mill complex, I will not do that.
Okay.
That's a little bit above and beyond my what I want to do. But basically, it's pre-purchase single family houses and multis, and we do a lot of doing more and more
condominiums, right?
Oh, of course, yeah. Condominiums, yep, definitely. We inspect. I inspect the 800 square foot small houses with crawl spaces, and I've done several of the Newport mansions right on Cliff Walk. So those are fun. Those
must be exciting.
Those take days.
They
literally take days because I remember one I did. It had usually one of us might have one or two central air conditioning systems in the house. There's one, I forget the name. They all have names out there. I forget the name of it, but had 17 individual central air conditioning systems. So 17 air handlers, 17 condensing units outside, and you could evaluate each one. So those take days, but you get good money for them.
So it'll take you 3 days just to inspect
easily
the house.
Yeah. Tons of probably 400 pictures. You might not include them all in the report, but you take a lot of pictures because it's hard to remember everything that you're looking at.
I would think that's pretty interesting too.
It's really interesting.
You're finding, for those of us who've never been in those kinds of houses.
Oh yeah.
You're finding little things in the house, like the little room behind the door, and the kind of thing. And that people had, specialty houses brought on specialty things that are in the house, and that must be pretty cool.
I remember one we did. It was back in my Griggs and Brown days, probably a good 25 years ago. We did the Hammersmith farmhouse when the Kennedy family was selling it to a guy from Pawtucket. I'm from Pawtucket originally. A guy from Pawtucket bought it, and so we're doing the inspection, and we got to go behind the ropes and all that. That was exciting. You could see where the average person couldn't go. So it was really interesting. Yeah, It was a beautiful piece of property too.
Yeah, Hammersmith, Bouvier, Jacqueline.
That's
Bouvier,
it was her family. I'm sorry, I can't.
It was her family.
Right.
Kennedy,
That's what I meant.
I think they ended up with that. Wow. So, what do you typically, Paul, when you let's walk our audience through the process. They go in, they see a house, they like it, they make an offer. The seller accepts the offer. They sign a sales agreement subject to their ability to get a mortgage and subject to the home inspection.
Right.
So now enter Paul Brunetti. They call you because they know you're competent, qualified to do the inspection. You go over, and typically, what's the type of inspections you recommend to the regular everyday buyer?
Well, the general home inspection is the way I do it. I think most of us do it. Is a very comprehensive, involved inspection. my usual MO. If I get too wordy, just tell me.
No.
I meet my clients right at the property. In fact, this is one of the only, I think, jobs you have or professions that you don't meet your client until that day at the inspection.
Right.
You don't know who they are until you get there.
You pull up to the house and you don't.
And boom,
you know
yeah.
Who's the gardener and who's the buyer?
Yeah, who's the homeowner?
Right.
Exactly. And so I actually have a. It's gotten very, very legal over the years, and unfortunately, it's a very litigious business. That's why our Arizona emissions insurance is very expensive.
Right.
We can talk about that later if you want to. So I meet my client and I review I have a 2-page pre-inspection contract. I try to be very upfront. It explains what I inspect, what I don't inspect, the standards of practice I follow. It talks about it is a confidential report. In fact, that's part of the law too. Unless I already do this anyways, but now it's going to be law that if, say, the seller or the listing agent asks me questions or wants a copy of the report, you have to. I can't just give it to you.
So you
I
have
have
to
to
get
authorize permission. So I have a spot right in my report, and I do a lot of mostly. I work with buyer brokers. That's just the way it is, I guess. And so I always say, listen, you really should put your buyer broker's name there because if there's negotiating, he or she needs to do that.
Right.
I'm going to give you plenty of information. So basically, I review all that, and I also incorporate in my contract. I asked to take a look at the seller disclosure document.
That's good. That's great.
I think it's a good idea.
That's
I get
smart,
some weird looks sometimes from listing agents. Say, "Why do you want that?" Well, I says, as an inspector, you're always starving for information. I'll believe what I want to believe, of course, and they usually. And honestly, this might sound naive, but I think most people are honest. I really do. I think the majority of people are honest, but there's obviously a small percentage that are not honest.
Right.
Hence, that's why we have inspections and
Exactly.
things like that, right? So, and I do it in sections. I do the entire exterior and garage. And if I'm doing a septic inspection, I'll get that going as well. That's an optional inspection. Then I can get my buyer and his agent. And if there's sometimes a listing agent wants to walk around too, that I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Sometimes that makes sense so they can see firsthand what they might have to deal with.
Right.
Down the road or
So I would think sometimes you're like a tour guide because you're out
Pretty
there
much,
and you got mom and dad, you
Oh,
got
yeah.
Uncle
that
Joe
happens.
who was a contractor 20 years
He's got a
ago.
screwdriver in his back pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
You got the two agents, the buyers' children. So you're leading this tour. So you're really the spotlight.
You're not exaggerating. That's exactly what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The spotlight's on you.
Yeah. And so you got to be able to talk to people and you have to have some tough skin because sometimes, especially if the seller is there, which sometimes, most of the time, it's not a good idea if the seller is there.
Right.
Other times it helps because there might be some kind of something you can't figure out. You don't know where something is. Oh, you got to move this picture. That's where the electrical panel is. And we don't like moving personal property. You don't want to break a mirror or something. Oh yeah, where's the electrical panel? You get a general idea because it's usually right behind the meter.
Right.
But if there's a 20 by 20 mirror, I don't want to touch the mirror.
Of course.
So anyway, so then I do all the exterior. I walk them around, point things out, what I came up with, and I make it an education. Yeah. I'm not just there to find things wrong. I'm trying to tell them how to take care of their house, where the main shutoffs are. And, they might ask me, well, how often should I do this, and how old do you think the roof is? When?
Because a lot of people don't know the maintenance
Right.
schedule.
Oh, no.
I remember years ago, and I think it might have even been one of your inspections years
Could be.
ago.
Could
Because things stick in my head,
Oh.
even though a lot of things are leaving my head.
I'm with you, man.
I think you had mentioned about turning the breakers on and off once a year.
It's not a bad idea. Yeah.
And I had never heard that before.
Especially a damp basement, they could get stuck and not trip when they should
Right.
trip.
And
Yeah.
how many people actually do? And I was in the real estate business, and I had never heard that before.
Yeah. I don't know how many people do it. It's not a bad idea. I'm not sure if an electrician would agree with that, but I think it's not a bad idea at all.
Sure.
It
Makes
So
perfect sense.
so I do all that, and I typically go into the basement. In my opinion, the basement is where all the good stuff. I always call it the good stuff. Where all it
mechanicals
is. I usually tell them, I said, give me an hour down here by myself. Give me some alone time, some me time. And I fire up the heating system, air conditioning if it's in season, and I do all my basement stuff. Take the electrical panel cover off. We are allowed to do that. You can't stick anything in it, but I heard some home inspector refused to take the cover off. They're going to have to be taking them off with this new licensing program because there's so much that can go wrong.
Sure.
Behind, we don't touch anything. We're not probing anything. It's a visual inspection when it comes to electrical.
Wow.
And you've probably seen rust. We see rust, and sometimes you open up the panel, water is pouring out of the panel. I'm not exaggerating. With the right wind-driven rain, the service cable comes into the top of the meter box, electrical meter. That is, there's a seal, there's an electrician's putty there that people don't realize that it doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
In fact, they dry up, birds
I've always
peck
thought
at
that
it.
was kind of a silly in this
Oh,
day and
my
age where
goodness.
we could put a man on the moon. They can't figure out a better
They've
way
gotten
to
better.
keep
They
the
got
water.
a better meter socket, but still you need that seal. And I can't tell you how many times that's usually that's the breach. That's where with the right wind-driven rain,
Yeah.
you open up the panel, there's all kinds of rust. There's actual water sometimes. I've got some pictures I can show you later if you want to see them.
Sure.
So that's the reason why you want to take the panel cover off. Sometimes the panel cover is actually plastered over along the edges.
Oh, boy.
That's a little tricky. Then I want permission from the seller before I take my razor knife out, and because I'd rather not do that. But if they hold me harmless and I got a witness saying, "No,
Yeah.
I tell them I'm going to make a mess. I'll be as neat as I can, but you're going to know I was here." Or even if it's just painted shut.
Right.
You know, you pull that off, and all of a sudden you take a
chip-
big
yeah, you got
piece of
chips
it.
of paint as-
Oh,
yeah,
and you know,
yeah.
some people, they get
Of
very
course,
upset about
of
that, and
course,
rightly
yeah.
so. And like I mentioned earlier, you got to respect the people's houses that you're in.
Wow, that's
So
great.
I go down the basement, I walk them around, point all these things out, maintenance on furnaces, on boilers, show them where the main water shutoff is, how to replace the air filter, where the main electric shutoff is.
Yeah.
You know, show them where the oil tank is. Take a look at that. We're finding a lot of leaky oil tanks. You know, oil tanks. I come from a heating background. We used to sell them. They don't last forever. They last a long, long time.
Right.
But we're finding more and more leaky and wet and
Yeah,
porous oil
I had
tanks.
to replace mine.
Did you? Yeah, it's not cheap anymore.
Well, you know, it scared me because my oil man came over to do the annual
cleaning,
cleanup,
tuning.
tune
Yeah.
up on my boiler.
Sure.
And he, you know, in part of that inspection, he comes over and he looks at the tank,
Mm-hmm.
and and I had just had it filled, and
boy.
he said, you know, you got some serious rust under there, and I mean, this was like a Friday afternoon.
Oh boy, of course.
And of course,
Murphy's Law.
yeah, so now I'm like panicking because I just
Was it
filled-
wet though? That's
it
the
wasn't
key.
wet, but
Oh, okay, well that you.
but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
you know, in my mind I'm saying, oh my God, I'm gonna have 275 gallons of oil all over my basement
Right.
because, and of course, you know, they came and I had them the following Monday. That's how nervous I got about
You
it.
had it replaced, yeah.
They pumped it out. They pumped out the old oil and they put a new tank in, and it wasn't cheap. It was a couple of $1,000.
I was going to say around two. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a couple of $1,000.
And
Wow.
you know, there was a time when many moons ago you were able to you were allowed to repair a leaky tank. They would use fiberglass. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
Okay, they
would-
wrap it.
Yeah,
Wow.
and sometimes you'd even see buckles like a suspender system.
Really?
That's a no-no. In fact, even nowadays, I think any oil company, most oil companies, if they know that there's a repaired tank, they probably will not want to put oil in the tank.
really?
Because even if it's not leaking, my recommendation is always if it's a repaired tank, clearly it leaked,
Yep.
and nobody stands behind these things. Nobody wants to put oil into a previously repaired tank.
I don't blame them.
Again, that's one of those maybe unpopular recommendations,
Right.
but it's the right recommendation.
Because everything only lasts so long.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me take a short commercial break. We're here with Paul Brunetti of Paul Brunetti Home Inspections, and we will be right back after this commercial message.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
And we are back with Paul Brunetti. And Paul, you were just mentioning of a few, some of the things that you look for in a house and some of the red flags. But now there's different kinds of inspections, right? You got a home inspection, right?
Yeah, the general home inspection is evaluation of the exterior, interior, the roofing, the plumbing, the heating, gutters, attic, room by room, basement, decks, all that kind of stuff. That's your general home inspection.
Okay, and then you have well inspections for people who live.
Yeah,
out
I mean,
in-
most of us include a termite in wood boring inspection. Some charge separate for it. I think most of us include it. Then, of course, you have septic and cesspool inspections.
Okay.
And there's usually two types of well test. There's well water quality, that's the condition of the water, bacteriological,
Yep.
and then a complete evaluation, things like, manganese and turbidity and, that's nitrite, nitrate, there's a whole bunch of things. Radon in water. If you have a drinking water well, the state recommends, the Department of Health recommends to, beyond testing your house for air, radon in air, they recommend that you also test your drinking water well for radon.
Wow.
A lot of people don't realize that. That's a good recommendation. So we do that. The other well test is the water flow test.
Okay.
It's also called a well yield test.
Yeah.
That's how well, this sounds funny, but how well the well is producing water.
Right.
Gallons per minute type thing.
Yeah.
What else? There's lead paint inspections. There are mold inspections. It's a four-letter word these days. MOLD.
Sure. And that's a growing problem.
It
right?
sure is. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of. So if you're buying a house in a rural area, you can rack up quite a bill.
Oh, sure.
Some people forego certain inspections. I think it's a mistake if you forego a septic inspection or a well inspection. They're expensive items to replace if they have to be replaced.
Big ticket.
You know that, yeah.
Big ticket items. So typically, give me an example, Paul, of just the common things that you usually find in an older home. I know, like for example, I have a development in Cumberland with new houses, and the buyers are still having inspections on the brand new construction, and the inspectors find things that the building inspector missed.
You'd be surprised,
obviously,
yeah.
and it's a brand new house, and we have a certificate of occupancy, and the town's electrician came through, and the town's plumber came through, and the mechanicals, and it's a great bill of health.
There's so many inspections you have to go through to build a house now.
Right, so you would think that, this is golden. It's just like a car coming off the assembly line at General Motors. It needs nothing, but did someone did a subcontractor use a cotter pin instead of a screw, and so that there are a bunch of little things. But typically on an older home, when I say older, anything 5-10 years old, what's the red flags? What are the things that you usually see?
Flags. I mean, we're looking for so many things. Anything that's atypical, but some of the things that I find, I guess I could talk about. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of termite damage. Rhode Island. This is a termite state. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. And I would think maybe not 50%, but I'll bet 30 to 40% of the houses I test for radon, that's an optional, come high. We're a radon state too. I had a level of 27 in my basement. I live in South County. Had to put a system in. Yeah. So we find a lot of radon, a lot of termite.
I had a system in my house too. I had to do it.
It's very common, very common.
Right.
I find a lot of attics are underventilated, and you see it could be mildew, could be mold.
Yeah.
You get that black staining. Houses are very, very commonly underventilated, and also a lot of people, usually it's a DIY thing. They'll put in a new bathroom, they put a bathroom fan in, and they discharge the bath fan into the attic.
Yeah.
Big no. It's just adding all that. You want it as cold in the attic as it is outside during the winter. You don't want to put any heat, any moisture up there.
You're basically throwing buckets of water up into the attic. Right.
It's steam, and it's conducive to mold and conducive to ice damming. It's all bad things,
really? Wow.
I can go on.
A lot of people don't think of that because that's how mold grows, right? It's got to be a dark environment with moisture.
Usually, I'm not a mold expert, but I'm told that all mold starts from some water source. You need a water source,
right?
Moisture. Then dirt gets in there, and I don't know the science behind it,
right.
But that's how mold is created.
Yeah.
And mold doesn't usually die,
Yep.
And getting back to radon, you hear, well, the house was been buttoned up for a month. It's going to have high radon. Radon doesn't work that way.
Right.
Radon is constantly being worn off, and I think it's every 12 hours.
Yeah.
So a house that's been buttoned up, it's not going to have a higher radon because of that.
Right.
It's constantly generating new radon.
I see.
It's kind of a misnomer. A lot of people just think that, and that's a common misconception too, I think.
Yeah. And I've heard basically the same thing. When I lived up in Burrillville. I always heard that if you got ledge, you're going to have radon. On my property,
not necessarily.
My house, I was on sugar sand. I was basically on a septic gravel bank, which was right down the street from the property you were telling me about. It was basically a gravel bank.
I know, it was.
And you could dig down in my yard.
It's the biggest gravel pit I've seen in my life. That's enormous, that place.
Yeah, and it was just like going to the beach, But our radon level was like a 10.
Oh, was it?
And for those of the audience who don't know, the 4 is the recommended level. Anything over 4 is the recommended level to address
Right.
it. Well, mine was a 10, and I said, well, my son's going to be playing down in the basement. It was a finished basement.
Sure.
Let me get a crew in here, and they put the system in, which was nothing more than a pipe and a fan, and
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
that brought it down to like under 1, and we were happy.
Yeah.
Right. But
So like what you just said about ledge and it's rocky and this and that. It really, what it comes down to is where the uranium deposits are in the ground. There's uranium in the ground all over the world, and uranium. It changes gas, and it turns into radium. Then radium breaks down, decays, turns into radon.
I see.
And they're all daughters. That's a technical term, actually, daughters of one another. And if you're exposed to elevated levels of radon for a long time, as you know, it can cause lung cancer.
Right.
In fact, probably 25 years ago, the Surgeon General at the time actually declared, and still hold to this, it's the second leading cause of lung cancer, second
Really?
only to cigarette smoke.
Wow.
So if you smoke cigarettes and you have a high radon level in your house, man, you're really tempting fate.
yes, it's invisible. It's
Yeah, you
odorless,
can't smell it. You can't
it's
just
not-
look at a house and say, yeah, that one's got radon. Yeah,
Right.
and it can vary from house to house. I told you, I live in South County. I had a level 27 in my basement. My parents lived right across the street, directly across the street. Tested their house. I'm at 27. They're 2.1.
Wow. Imagine
Tested
that.
all my, so it's all. I mean, I must have had a uranium deposit kind of running pretty much below.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And how they came up with radon, how they discovered it, it's been around forever. Coal miners. Now, granted, they're in the ground. I'm not sure how deep they are, but they go very, very deep. So it's called a Class A carcinogen, meaning they have test subjects, human test
Right.
subjects, not just laboratory animals.
I see.
Yeah. So it's, a lot of people just don't believe it.
Right.
I believe it. I do
Yeah.
continuing education every 2 years just to maintain my radon license. Rhode Island has a radon license. You have to be I'm RMC 011. It's a radon measurement consultant.
I see.
You have to be licensed to do radon testing in the state of Rhode Island.
Is there any education associated with that, or
Oh yeah, you have to take.
read-
You have to take.
read
It's like a 2-day course, and then you have to
Okay.
pass a very difficult test. I got to be honest with you, it's one of the most difficult tests I've ever taken.
Well,
They-
science. I mean,
it's-
there's a lot of heavy
they
science,
teach you.
right?
Honestly, I'll critique it for a minute.
Yeah.
They teach you so much more than you really need to know to place and retrieve radon test devices.
I
But
see.
and there's been some talk about maybe making the continuing ed a little bit easier for home inspectors, because we're not a laboratory. We're not analyzing them. We place them, we retrieve them, and we have a lab that does the analysis. So but we've been talking about that for 25 years too.
Okay.
So who knows what's going to come out of that?
So you come up. So after you do all of your testing, you come up with a final report.
Yes.
So depending on the inspections that the buyer selects, it's like a la carte, right?
It is,
I'll have the lead, but I won't have the septic, or I'll have the septic and I
don't
don't
want the
want well.
radon,
And so, and then there's some people that want the whole package with HBO and Showtime
Exactly.
and everything. And
Good analogy.
right?
Yeah.
And you prepare this report, and it goes back to the buyer, and then the buyer, at that point, they have to review
Sure.
your work, and then they have to make a hard decision, right?
Hard decision, and a pretty fast decision too, because you get this whole 10-day affair.
Yeah.
And what I do, so when I come out of the basement, then I do the rest of the house and the attic, and then I'll walk them around, point things out to them. Because I don't like to surprise people with the report. I always tell them, I said, everything that I'm telling you about will be in your report. So it's not like they're going to read the report and say, "Wow, yeah, I didn't know that." You want to tell them so it's not a surprise.
Right.
And I use the home gauge reporting system. Years ago, you probably remember the handwritten reports.
The handwritten reports.
Well,
yeah.
I look back now, I just
Oh,
laugh
yeah,
at those.
yeah.
No pictures,
Wow.
handwritten, and you printed, because my penmanship was horrible, so you'd print.
Well, there was no way to take pictures of it.
No,
Other than
no.
Bring the film down to the drugstore
Exactly,
and have
exactly.
them right now.
So I think everyone's using home inspection software. I put a lot of pictures in, and most of them are not problematic. Just like a picture of where the main shutoffs are, and this and that, and an average picture. I might take 10 pictures of the roof just to document what the condition of the roof.
Right.
So
And
it's
that's great for future reference.
Totally.
I tell people it's like having an owner's manual with your
totally
car.
yes.
Because later on, because a lot of people don't like. My wife one day called me, and the person who built one of the houses I lived in, and my father being a plumber went nuts. When we bought the house, my father, being the plumber, discovered that there were no shutoffs behind the toilets. So,
It's important.
well, that's a little important, right? So, my father said, I'm going to come over and I'm going to put some shutoffs behind your toilets and blah. Of course, he criticized the plumber who did the thing. I heard it. Who would buy a house? All of a sudden, I was the dummy. Who would buy a house that doesn't have shutoffs? Because, my father's world, that was important. So
Sure.
I always said, all right, we're going to take care of it. We're going to take care of it. We're going to take care of it. Well, guess what? One day, the toilet overflowed. Somebody, put something down the toilet that they weren't supposed to, and then it started overflowing.
Going over. How do you stop it at that
So my
point?
wife now
Go down to the main at that point.
well, she didn't know where the main was, so she calls me in a panic. Now water's coming down from the second
It's
floor.
raining inside the house.
So I think that the reports that you're mentioning now are fantastic, because it's like an owner's manual for
Sure.
a house, and I know you do it. You describe all the maintenance things
Yes,
that people
we
should do. Something as simple as, in the wintertime you should shut your
Outside-
water out to the
absolutely.
outside hose,
Sure.
before, instead of finding out about it after it's frozen. Right?
You're hating life if you forget, because all of a sudden you hear, psh,
Exactly.
what's that noise?
Absolutely.
Split pipe.
So I think that's huge.
Earlier, you asked me one of the more common things I find. I would say almost every inspection, you always find some electrical infraction.
Yeah.
People seem to feel comfortable doing their own electrical work, and you're allowed to if it's inspected. But man, you see open splices, just wires just twisted together.
Yeah.
No, missing junction box covers. I know it's an easy thing, but a little kid can put their hand in there.
Right.
A mouse can go in there and short something out. An inquisitive cat can put his nose in there,
Yeah.
So if I had to pick one thing that I see problematic more often than anything else, it would be electrical.
Yeah.
Yeah, people, I would say most of my reports, I have to recommend evaluation and repair by a licensed electrician, because of what I came up with.
Exactly.
That's how common it is.
Oh, you get the people like I had a family member daisy chain about 40 plugs onto one breaker because he decided he was going to finish his basement, and he really didn't know how to run circuits back to the panel, so he decided that he was going to just take one plug and just wire the whole basement off of that one plug, and he was always wondering why the breaker was always popping. So that's a prime example. Everyone's a weekend warrior, right? They want to do this
And
stuff.
I've been doing it. Was you talked about new construction earlier? I did a new construction inspection, and they had the CO, certificate of occupancy, and they were done. I think the foreman was there doing some light cleanups and painting or something, some touch-ups or something, but they were done. The house was done, and so I come down from the attic, and the foreman happened to see me come down the ladder, and he says, "Everything okay up there?" And I don't normally I'm supposed to talk to my client, but I thought it was a good thing to say this. I says, well, no. I says, I done the exterior first. It was a colonial, and you know what a ridge vent is, of course, right? So we have soffit.
The top of the
Yeah, so the soffit vents are the overhang behind the gutters, and that's actually air intake, and it kind of cools off the attic and then exits the ridge vent, the peak. So there's a ridge vent. I go up in the attic. They didn't leave a space. They just had the plywood butt up against each other.
Yeah.
And there's no space. So I told them,
defeats the whole purpose of the ridge vent. Yeah.
So I told him, I said, they didn't leave a slot for the ridge vent. He goes, you're full of, what? And I said, here's my ladder, here's my flashlight. Have at it, man. He comes down. I won't say the word he said, but he says, I'll kill him. Talking about the sub. There's an old saying. There's some validity to it. As perception-wise, you're only as good as your worst sub.
Right.
I don't really believe that, but that's perception-wise, that can be true sometimes.
Absolutely.
And this builder had an impeccable record. I won't
Right.
mention. He had an impeccable record. So he was ticked off. But I had to call it out.
Yeah.
It wasn't the end of the world, but that was probably a half day's work to fix that.
Wow. And of course, the building inspector, I'm surprised.
I don't know if they check for things like that.
Yeah, really.
See, that's why and I'm not disparaging a building official, but I don't think there's certain things that's not under their purview.
Yeah.
And I don't think they go in afterwards and look to make sure that the slot was left open.
No.
I really don't. That's just not part of their scope. I'm pretty sure. If one's listening,
And of course, they
correct me if
can
I'm wrong.
only inspect so much.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's why I think. I average like 3 hours for a home inspection.
Wow. Yeah,
and then
that's
and
quite
then
a
another hour and a half to computerizing, as I call it, back at the office.
Yeah.
And we put together. I drag in the pictures, and I put together a very detailed report. And I like to educate the customer, the consumer.
So you're not, you're limited by your time because you're only doing so many of these a day at best. You can do 2 a day, right?
That's the max for me. I mean, unless you want to work till 9 o'clock at night, which I'd rather not do.
Right, that's a lot
I think
of
that it is sometimes just computerizing things and
Wow.
wrapping it up. But I think most inspectors do maybe 2 a day. Some
Now-
days you can't do 2. You can do other things.
I just thought of something. Do you ever have, let's say the scenario is such where you inspected the house and they found things. And I don't know, the buyer negotiated with the seller to fix the things. And of course the buyers now, they really don't know how well the.
Right.
Did
Is
I
it
call
corrected?
did I call my cousin to come over and wire that?
Did
plug?
Uncle Louie do it? Yeah, yeah.
Right. Or did I hire a real electrician?
Right.
Does it happen often where they call you back to come in a second time for the final before they decide that they're going to close? They're actually going to close on those?
Actually, not a lot, but more than you would think. How do I say it? They can be a nuisance because time is money,
Right.
and so depending on the situation, you kind of have to charge for it
Sure.
because you're going back. It's time, and right now it's very busy. The real estate market, as you know, is really good. So that means all the vendors within that, the appraisers, the inspectors, we're all busy too.
Sure.
So yes, I am called sometimes, and if I need to go back, I will go back. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's tricky to get back within the time frame sometimes.
Exactly.
And it depends on what it is too. If it's electrical work, I will say, listen, if it's if you got a document from a licensed electrician saying here's what was done, I would think that should be acceptable.
Yeah.
Unless the electrician carries more of authority than I do, certainly.
Sure.
On electrical work.
Well, I find too, and I know I realize it's always about money. Especially when you're starting off a first-time home buyer, that they're trying to put a couple of nickels together to make a quarter, and I understand that. But I don't think it's explained to them how important it is up front to know what they're buying. It's like I got a cousin in the car business, and it's nice having my cousin when I buy a used car. It's nice to be able to call Steve in to have Steve check the car out, and
Sure.
of course, I could drive that car down the road the next day, and the transmission could fall out of it. But you know what? That's the chance you take with anything that's not new and with no warranty. But I suggest everyone, if they can, spend the money up front. And
for a home inspection.
Do the whole host of home inspections, just if anything, so for the future.
Absolutely. If nothing else, it's peace of mind.
Right.
When I see people say, "Oh, I'm not gonna have the well test done," that's several $1,000s if it fails. Septic systems, oh my goodness, that's even.
And when do you find out that your well just went? When you're in the middle of a shower or in the middle of a load in the washing machine, and all of a sudden there's no water.
Right.
It happens.
Or it's coming through, very rusty. What's going on here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
So I think that's a mistake that some people make. Not most people know better, and they will, they'll do their due diligence, as we call it.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, that's great. Good stuff. We're going to take another quick commercial break. We got 10 minutes left with Paul Brunetti of Brunetti Home Inspections, and we will be right back.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
These pre-listing inspections.
Okay, Paul, we're back with Paul Brunetti. And Paul, I was just kind of reviewing, some of the notes we've been taking here today. The common paperwork. You talked about the report, but I know some of the banks require additional paperwork, right?
For like a termite report.
Termite reports. So that's something that you prepare.
Yes, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because most of us use the NPMA 33. That is the government FHA VA termite report. And if there's any home inspectors or termite inspectors listening, there's a new one coming up. They revised it, and I think it's going to be December. I'm not 100% on that, but so look for that. It's been revised. That's the government form that the FHA and VA. This is interesting, and I'm sure you know this. If your client is going through VA, the seller apparently has to pay for the termite inspection.
Correct. Yeah.
I always wonder how that happened. How did it morph into that?
Yes.
There must have been something happened at some point.
I think the way it worked, I think that came about after World War II. To be honest with you,
as a perk,
as a
to the
perk,
vets?
because
Yeah.
the GIs under the GI Bill didn't have a lot of money in their
Okay.
pocket, and
Yeah.
they needed, every way they could save a nickel. They put the burden on the sellers to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think I'm almost that's what I was always
Yeah, because
told.
a lot of times after the fact, I never know which way their mortgage is going to go.
Right.
Like 2 weeks later, I'll get a call from a mortgage underwriter. Oh, well, how much was it? How much was it just for the termite report? We have to have the seller has to reimburse, and it gets tricky because we include our termite inspections in the home inspections.
Yeah, the package deal.
Yeah, but if I
right?
was going to charge separate, it would be $125, that kind of thing,
Right.
or whatever it is. So yeah, that comes up quite a bit.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
But so as far as forms, there's a lot of. I don't think anybody is left doing handwritten reports. I don't know. Maybe there are. Software is the way to go. You can integrate the pictures. You put them in. There's a lot of what I call boilerplate statements that you just say the same thing a lot, and you just tweak it for that particular house. And it's just a lot of good information. But I spend a good hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes on just preparing the report.
I see.
Because I don't take shortcuts. I just try to give them their money's worth.
Yeah. Plus, when it's fresh in your mind. Too,
Yes.
I would think that's important.
Yeah.
Especially the older you get.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to miss anything because you let a few days lapse, and all of a sudden it's I forgot.
Exactly. I mean, when I'm doing my inspection, I have a camera around my neck, and I just take tons of pictures because that's my notebook.
Right.
I take notes too, but I mean, take a picture of something, boom, I know exactly what I got to talk about.
Jogs your memory.
Another thing we do a lot of, I'm not sure if you do these with your clients, more and more pre-listing inspections.
Okay.
Yeah,
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, you put. I would say you put the fires out before they start.
Right.
That kind of thing.
So in other words, the seller
hires you.
hires you before.
Same inspection,
Okay.
just like I'm doing for the buyer. But like I said earlier, a lot of homeowners don't know a lot of things that are going on in their house. And that's normal, because I crawl around in crawl spaces. My size is very conducive to crawl into tight crawl spaces, whether it be attic crawl space or an underfloor crawl space.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be the most pleasant part of the job, but you do what you got to do. You suit up, you put your personal protection equipment on, your mask and all that, and you have at it. So I found that these pre-listing inspections, I think the biggest not detriment, but the kind of detriment is the sellers don't want to spend the money.
Right.
That's what I
Right.
say, because it's could be $400 or $500.
Sure.
That's what inspections cost these days. Yeah. But it'll tell you what's going on, and it'll put a fire out before it starts.
Right.
So now and you sit down with your listing agent and say, geez, you know what? This is going to come up on a home inspection.
Right.
Let's either disclose it or fix it.
Absolutely.
That kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would think too, just having it's almost like when a seller hands me an appraisal of their house
Oh, yeah.
before I put the house on the market.
Gives you an idea, sure.
That allows me to hand it to the buyer and say, hey, look, we're asking whatever the $259.9.
It's just appraised
and
that.
a bank appraiser just appraised this for $259.9. So you know what you're getting here. It's not like a big secret and no one's guessing at the price. I would think having the inspection is the same thing. Mr. Buyer, we just had this home completely inspected, and these were the issues that they found, and we addressed X, Y, Z, and A, B, and C. And you're certainly welcome to bring your own home inspector in.
Yeah.
But
and I think most people do. Some don't, but I think most people do, because they say, well, he was hired by the seller, and
Right.
there's people that just
Exactly.
suspicious. But it's the identical inspection if I'm doing it for you as the buyer or for the seller. It's the same inspection.
I recommend that, Paul, when I have a house that's an estate,
Oh, yes.
or
There's no disclosure, right?
there's no disclosure, or it's a house that the person is laid up. Mom or dad just got sent to the nursing home,
Right.
And the kids don't live around here, and they really don't know. Because you take my dad for instance. Duct tape and WD-40 were his two biggest weapons in his arsenal. And you just don't know what was in that house. And I always suggest to those people who are selling an estate house or that kind of situation, you should really have it inspected first, so at least there's no surprises.
No surprises,
and then it allows me to price it accordingly.
Sure, exactly.
Because if you have to go, if you tell me the heat isn't working and I have to try to price this house now, I'm not in the HVAC business, so I don't know what it's going to cost to have the system replaced. So
Sure.
it's a valuable tool. So, for those folks listening, if you're in that situation, it might be advisable to do that. Just in any event, you'll get the money back.
It seems like we're doing more and more of those. It's every year we do more and more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll get the money back in the
I think
asking
so.
price of the house, or
Sure.
just the negotiation. So it's granted it's money up front that
Yes,
you
it
have
is.
to pay,
Yeah.
but still on the backside you're gonna get it back.
Yeah, and what most people do when we do the pre-listings is just the pre-listing, the home inspection, the general home inspection, and termite. Usually they leave the septic and the radon and the other stuff up to the buyer, because you could easily spend a lot of money. Then it might not be cost effective.
Right.
Some people have me do a radon test as a pre-listing, but most don't. Most don't.
So the how do you find it right now? So you must be very busy right now in this market.
Crazy busy, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
You're going someplace every single day.
It's a good problem to have, so to speak. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, and I'd like to go on record. When I left Griggs and Brown, they were very generous to me. Griggs and Brown actually closed the home inspection portion of their building.
I didn't know
of their
that.
business, I should say, and they pretty much turned it over to me. And they were very generous to me.
Wow.
You don't hear that stuff too long anymore these days. They were very generous. I get their referrals. So thank you, Griggs and Brown.
Well, it's great when a company can do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
because
Well, I
you-
was there for
you-
30 plus years. I was a board of director.
Yeah,
and
you leave
they-
on good terms, and
Totally very good
everybody's
terms.
happy, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's a win-win for all parties.
It really is. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So we have about a minute left. Paul, why don't you give the audience your contact information?
Oh, sure.
Your phone numbers and your email and all that other good stuff, because they may want to call you for some of the things we talked about today.
Sure. So my name is Paul Brunetti, Senior, actually, and the name of the company is Brunetti Home Inspections LLC, and my website is BrunettiHomeInspections.com. And I do offer military discounts as well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, I've never been in the military, but a lot of my family members were, and I just really respect that.
Nice.
My contact number, my office number is 515-7575. I'll give you my cell as well. Everybody has it already. 401. It's 578-5461.
Great. Now, just with a few seconds left, you haven't met many military clients?
Oh yeah. I used to give like 5 or 10%, depending on what the bill is.
Right.
Several. I get quite a few inspections right from my website.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great. Well, today we've had Paul Brunetti of Brunetti Home Inspections. We thank you. And having said that, I thank you for listening. And we will talk to you next week. And again, my number is 401-265-6144. Thank you.